Hello everyone, xForts here, and welcome to JoJolion Chapter 97 Review and Discussion. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe and excited for your monthly dose of JoJolion. So to jump right into it, starting with the cover page, we have a Jobin cover page, which I was pleading for last month, even though we got a Josuke one once again, and he wasn't even in the chapter, but Jobin's getting some love now. We have Speed King in the background doing Speed King things, just kind of yelling, and some what looks like to be smoke in the background as well, but as we'll come to find out in just a few pages, is actually not. And there's some narration as per usual, and this one says, "Can that heat burn the Calamity away?" No, I don't think it can. Speed King is definitely outclassed against this head doctor's ability here. Once again, as we'll come to find out in a few pages here. So getting into the actual start of the chapter now, well, before we do that, let's actually back up a little bit to chapter 96. I cannot believe we are this far into JoJolion. I'm saying the words 96 and 97. Oh my god, guys, in just a few months, I'm going to be here saying, hello everyone, xForts here, and welcome to JoJolion Chapter 100. We should do some sort of celebration for JoJolion Chapter 100. That's going to be huge. Wow, I seriously can't even fathom that we're going to be in 100. But let's back up real quick to last month, chapter 96. So where we left off was that the head doctor had a new ability revealed in a sense, and it was that he can be multiple places at once. He can sort of teleport around, as well as he is not very tangible, or at least he can sometimes make himself tangible and other times not tangible, as we saw him moving through glass, going inside of pictures, and even shrinking his size, making himself bigger than he actually is, smaller than he actually is, and going underneath the sheet of the bed and chasing after Jobin. So that was a big reveal, and there was a lot of theorizing to do about the ability then. And now chapter 97 comes in, and there's even more theorizing about the ability, as it seems like it can do even more things now, as we'll come to find out later in the chapter. So chapter 97 picks up right where we left off with Jobin attacking the head doctor as he comes through underneath the sheets, but it turns out that he's not actually there anymore. He has disappeared and was seemingly replaced with an aerosol can, whether it be, I believe it's hairspray. And if you also remember at the end of the last chapter, I talked about that Jobin may be in for a deadly blow this chapter, because Mamazuku explained to us in chapter 96, once again, last chapter, a new explanation for the head doctor's ability, and that it works off karma. So pretty much, it's almost like an MMO mechanic, if you guys have ever played like RPGs or anything like that, where the more karma you build up, your karma gauge increases, and then when you're actually attacked by the head doctor's ability, which is if you pursue him, things will bump into you. The more negative karma you've stacked up, the greater that impact will be. As we saw the guy that went on like a murder spree on a bus, he was pretty much killed instantly with just the slightest intent to pursue the head doctor, while characters like Mamazuku and Josuke have been bumping into things for a lot of chapters and are relatively fine because they haven't stacked up that much negative karma. But as we know, Jobin has a lot of negative karma against him. He's been doing a lot of thievery, a lot of lying, a lot of cahoots with the rock humans, and just a ton of bad things throughout this entire part. And most recently, he betrayed his father, Norisuke, and even attempted to kill him. Maybe he just tried to knock him out, but he definitely didn't, that didn't give him good karma. So as I expected, Jobin was really like, if he was to be attacked by this head doctor, it would just be absolutely devastating. And as we'll come to find out in just a few pages, I know most of you guys have probably already read the chapter, even though I'm like tiptoeing here, trying not to spoil anything until we get there, but I think we all know what is coming. But before we get there, Mitsuba, as she does, feels the need to explain the head doctor's ability once again, using the word Calamity about 5 times in this beginning dialogue here. Guys, can we please figure out how many times the word Calamity has been said in the last like 5 chapters? It's got to be 20 plus, at least 15 of those coming from Mitsuba, without a doubt. But I guess it makes sense because Jobin isn't really aware of the head doctor's ability, and now that it's actually attacking him, I guess Mitsuba feels the need that Jobin should be in the know of how it works and that disasters will knock into you. That's the way Mitsuba really sees it. She hasn't really found out the karmatic link that Mamazuku went into last chapter. She pretty much just thinks when you pursue him, disasters will happen, which is true, but there is more depth to the stand, obviously, that Mamazuku explained. And Jobin seems to be a bit less interested in the head doctor's ability, and he actually wants to show appreciation of Mitsuba, saying that, it's because Mitsuba was here that she was able to get rid of Yasuo and, pretty much like continue on Jobin's goal. So without Mitsuba, Jobin probably would have fallen apart when Norisuke confronts him in the family and everyone wasn't there because Yasuo would have been against him as well. So it turns out that Mitsuba has actually been helping Jobin and all this, and he's appreciative towards it. And there's this one speech bubble. I don't know if this is a translation mistake or just Jobin trying to sound fancy, but this is giving me flashbacks to part 5 before it was like officially translated by good translators and scans, when it was just like nonsense pretty much every time a character talked. So this speech bubble says, Jobin talking to Mitsuba, "It's because you were here that I am here as I am right now. You've caused me to exist." If that doesn't give you guys flashbacks to like Giorno's speech at the end of part 5 back in like 2014-15 when there was bad translation. So I have talked to one of the members that worked on the team, and it's just they've been trying to translate things literally as well as getting the chapters out in a relatively quick time span. So sometimes we do encounter things like this, but they will oftentimes be fixed in later releases. So that's just kind of, the things we have to go through if we want to read these chapters as soon as possible. And speaking of translation fixes as well, a few chapters ago, if you guys remember the last time we saw Josuke, when he was waiting for the head doctor, he sent out the package. We were like, what could it be? And he said, "I can be made to pursue the head doctor." I pretty much just assumed that as he's going to make the head doctor pursue after him. Some people took it in a more literal sense. Maybe he's gone through some sort of transformation, but that was just a slight translation mistake. And what he should have said is that I can't chase after the head doctor, but I can make him pursue me. Pretty much like that. Just so sometimes we have these wonky translations. So continuing into the chapter, I normally wouldn't think too much of Jobin's dialogue there, but he seemed to be obviously showing appreciation towards Mitsuba, which I was like, okay, that's fine. Just Jobin talking. Didn't really think much of it. But then after we see what happens in the following pages here, where Jobin goes further into the Higashikata home, he looks at the security footage. He sees Yasuo laying on the ground. Obviously, Yasuo is just kind of, Yasuo's been in bad shape these past few chapters. I really hope things turn around for her soon here, because I really like Yasuo. She's one of my favorite characters in JoJolion, and I hate to see her like this, man. Just straight up suffering for a long time. But it also turns out that Toru has made it to the Higashikata home, and he is just kind of standing outside the residence behind some trees watching Yasuo, and Jobin notices that, and as soon as he notices Toru, which is interesting because we got to keep in mind that if you try to pursue the head doctor, a disaster will bump into you. And as soon as Jobin even notices Toru, similar to the way that Mitsuba noticed the head doctor in the backyard and then she cut her fingers off, if you guys remember that, kind of reminds me of that same situation that's happening right now. Jobin looks at Toru and he immediately starts to bleed. He looks at his hand is covered in blood, and then it turns out that a piece of the aerosol can, you know how sometimes aerosol cans will have like a little extender that you can clip on, like canned air or something like that. It looks like that piece had actually shot into Jobin right in the middle of his chest, which is probably his heart, which is causing this much blood to come out of him. And he is just spewing blood. It reminds me of like the scenes from like Kill la Kill where someone gets cut open and it just, or like a Quentin Tarantino movie or something. It's just a ridiculous amount of blood coming out of Jobin here. And then to make things even worse, he falls over and he's carrying the pot for the new Rokakaka, and that bumps into the thing that's stuck in his chest and pushes it even further, causing it to be an even more devastating blow, which definitely leads into that he's being affected by the head doctor here. It's no way Jobin just kind of accidentally slipped over, the thing fell on his chest, or that the thing got in his chest in the first place. Definitely head doctor standability. Probably when he punched the head doctor when he was underneath the sheets, that's what caused the aerosol can to maybe appear and then shoot into his chest. And then when he saw Toru and possibly in his mind became suspicious of Toru, that caused him to fall over like this. Because I assume when he saw Toru there, he's probably like, let's go see what that guy's up to. Then giving the the prerequisite to I am pursuing him, and then boom, this crazy thing happens. And I know a lot of people have been saying like, oh my god, another fake out death. This is Rocky series. This is like the third fake out death this year. We had one for Norisuke twice. We had 2 for Yasuo, 1 for Jobin now. And I don't think Jobin's dead. I'm gonna have to agree with those people. I don't think this is necessarily going to be like a fake out death though, because you have to think of it in terms that JoJolion will eventually end. And we are definitely getting close to the part's climax. As we'll see at the end of this chapter, we are only 2 hours away from the harvest. I believe the harvest is going to be where a huge calamity takes place, and really the climax of JoJolion in 2 hours once we hit that the time for the harvest. And it's like, things go down nearing the end of a JoJolion, or nearing the end of a JoJo part. Part 5, all of our friends start to die, and just characters generally start to die nearing the end of parts. And after seeing this much blood come out of Jobin, I just don't see how he can be healed in any way unless he eats the Rokakaka. And even then, at that point, he's lost so much blood and probably has so much internal damage, and the heart is such an important part of you. Equivalent exchange would have to like trade something of equal value. So maybe like all of his limbs or a piece of his brain or something, or something of course, equal value. It's equivalent exchange. So I don't see how Jobin is going to be able to fully recover from this. I would really hate it if it was just one of those like Stardust Crusaders things where it's like in one fight, our heroes lose so much blood and they just look like they're about to die. And then like in the next chapter, they're like, hey, Avdol, hey, Polnareff, like everything's back to normal, even though there was no healer in Stardust Crusaders. And after like a good night's rest, our characters were just able to miraculously heal their wounds. I really hope it's not going to be one of those situations. I hope this has actual consequences to it. And there's actual like, tangible things happen. Like a character can't just heal themselves out of nowhere. Mitsuba can't just walk up to Jobin and be like, oh, awaken 3 leaves. Let me push the blood back into your body or something. Because awaken 3 leaves has been pretty cheesy in the past like 15 chapters when it comes to healing, how she can like put an arrow on something and just shove it back to where it used to be. So I hope awaken 3 leaves doesn't come in with any, stupid, not a retcon really, but just like a Deus Ex Machina of like, I can heal this because, that's the way my stand works. Like it can do whatever it wants apparently. So I think in the next chapter, the next chapter, although as we'll see by the end, I don't think we're going to be covering with Jobin. I think we're going to be switching over to the hospital's perspective. Thank God. I predicted that this chapter we were going to be in the hospital or we were going to switch over to Josuke because we haven't seen him in like 5 chapters, which has been like 6 months in real life, which is a long time to go without having your protagonist on screen. So, but we do see him in this chapter nearing the end, and it's leading in to look like he is going to be the focus of the next chapter. And of course, after this cliffhanger, Araki's probably going to make us wait a few months to find out what actually happens to Jobin. But my predictions for what's going to happen next time we meet up with Jobin is that he'll still be alive, and he might have some like dying words or something like that, and Mitsuba might feed him the fruit. I could see something like that happening. And again, I mentioned how it was relevant how Jobin gave appreciation to Mitsuba. He was like, thank you. He didn't quite say like, I love you or anything like that, but he was just being nice to her. And I could see that also being some dialogue that foreshadowed this being his death in some way. Because usually before characters die or something, they'll be like, guys, I just want to take a moment to say how much I love all of you, how much I've appreciated our times together. And then it's like, oh God, a character's being appreciative, something bad is going to happen to him. And I kind of get that same vibe from Jobin after he took all this damage. And holy shit, this was some gruesome imagery right here. Jobin being attacked by the head doctor's ability. And I know I've been using the head doctor sort of interchangeable with Toru, but we'll get into that later. Those of you guys that have read the chapter, which should be most of you guys, okay? Don't come here for a substitute to read the chapter because like I don't cover everything in these chapter reviews. I skip pages sometimes or things that aren't so relevant. So always make sure you're reading the chapters either while you're watching the review or beforehand, preferably. So getting into it, we see Toru now, and he has this really suspicious look on his face. And it's really important to take note of like every specific detail about when we see Toru right here. So we switch scenes from Jobin being attacked to Toru, looking very malicious in a sense and having sort of like I don't want to say like a soulless eye, but just a really determined eye. And he puts in his headphones and Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train is playing. And then he switches the song to Elvis Presley, The Wonder of You. And speaking of The Wonder of You, back in chapters 82 through 86, 84 through 86, somewhere around there, the chapters that were the head doctor of the TG University Hospital, parts 1 through 3, and then after that, we had the Ojiro stuff. So when we first were chasing after the head doctor in the hospital, those chapters have actually been renamed in the JoJolion Volume 21 release to The Wonder of You, The Miracle of Your Love, I believe. The Wonder of You, and then in parentheses, The Miracle of Your Love. And The Wonder of You is a reference to Elvis Presley, of course, as we see right here in the chapter. So it's pretty likely that the stand we saw in the hospital, the one that everyone is kind of assigning to Toru because it has a motif, its eyes are like the sun's, and Toru has that patch on his shoulder that kind of looks like a sun or a flower. So people are assigning that stand to Toru, and now we see Toru listening to The Wonder of You. Those chapters have been renamed to The Wonder of You, so everyone's kind of agreeing that that stand is going to be called The Wonder of You, which would be pretty cool because I think this would be the first time ever in JoJo where like a character actually like named their stand knowing this musical reference, because we see Toru listening to The Wonder of You and he's like, that's a cool song, I'm gonna name my stand that. But it's also important to make note of that there was 2 songs showed, first being Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train and then The Wonder of You. And throughout this entire arc, everyone has been theorizing that there's 2 stands in play, the head doctor stand and Toru's stand, which I was a long believer of as well. But I kind of have a new theory as we see what's going to be revealed soon enough. But one thing I wanted to take note of is that, so you have Toru putting the headphones in, looking determined, but as soon as he puts the headphone in and switches the song to The Wonder of You, he closes his eyes and he looks a lot more goofy. He's dancing around. And meanwhile, this is all while Yasuo is on the ground dying, and Toru's initial reason for being in the Higashikata estate was coming there to save Yasuo. And he sees her on the ground, but instead he chooses to play a song, close his eyes, and dance around. We'll come back to this a little bit later. But switching perspectives over, we are now at the TG University Hospital, where we see the delivery man that Josuke paid finally being able to, I had too much coffee before this. Speaking of that, I gotta take a sip. So we finally see the delivery man that Josuke paid quite a few chapters ago, and we finally get to see where this package is actually going. I originally theorized that it was going to the prison where Mamazuku is being held, and that's why the delivery guy was like, wait, are you sure about this address? That's just me jumping to conclusions because I love Mamazuku and I wanted to see him again, and I would love anything with Mamazuku to happen throughout this part. But what a lot of other people theorized, and what actually turned out to be right, is that he was shipping it somewhere in the hospital, and everyone thought he was shipping it to the head doctor, so the head doctor would get a package, and maybe Josuke would be blackmailing him in some way, or just giving the head doctor a reason to pursue Josuke. And that's pretty much what's happening, but with a little bit of a twist, as we see the man, and I swear, if you guys thought Joshu's haircut was bad in JoJolion, wait until you see Tauka from Pangea Land, the delivery service or something, even though I thought it was called Bike High. Or no, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The man that Josuke delivered the package to is a reporter for a magazine called Pangea Land. His name is Tauka, and the delivery service that delivered the package was Bike High. Sorry, getting things mixed up. A lot of things going on in JoJolion right now. But if you guys thought Joshu's haircut was bad, look at this dude. He pretty much has the Joshu haircut, but with pigtails. Yes, these are real things Araki draws. I don't know why. But getting into it, you see the reporter entering the quarters of the head doctor, and Blair Witch style, you have the head doctor just sitting in the corner of the room. Just like that, which is like really creepy looking. And the guy, Tauka, comes in and he's like, hello, sir, I am from, or are you the head Dr. Akafu? I am from so-and-so and so. And then the head doctor just seems to be ignoring him, but then he turns around and immediately shows him his identification, almost as if he's trying to prove something. And I'm going to be skipping a lot of dialogue here because I just want to get into what the main point of this is. But Josuke shipped, I don't know how Josuke knew this, but Josuke shipped a package to a reporter that was attending the head doctor's seminar about regenerative medicine in Lokakaka 6251. I don't know how I remembered that, but I did. Maybe because 6251 is right over there. Nice reference, Araki. But Josuke shipped the reporter a package of evidence of them experimenting on Holly Joestar in the basement of the hospital, as well as a piece of Lokakaka 6251. Which is like, it's the one that Josuke took a bite of, I believe, because it's like in half. So it has that in a jar and the evidence. And the reporter guy is like, Mr. Head Doctor, there's footage here of Holly Joestar being pretty much experimented on. And, no one, I can't remember if it was a thing like she's gone missing or something, but whatever it was, the reporter is threatening the head doctor with this evidence that Josuke gave him. And I love how Josuke did all of this. Like, Josuke knew the reporter's name. He literally shipped it to the guy by name. He had an SD card with footage on it that he put in the box and the jar. It's like, and Josuke did all of that off screen. And I think it was like, I don't know, I guess it didn't show exactly how much time he did it, but it's just funny to think that Josuke went through this entire process. But back to the point of this whole interaction between Tauka, the journalist, and the head doctor. So the journalist is coming to blackmail the head doctor about this evidence that Josuke sent him. So it pretty much means the head doctor might get upset about Josuke about this and then might go confront him after he realizes what Josuke's gone through to try to expose him in some way. But the head doctor actually cleverly uses his ability here where he kind of like fabricates a reality where he's like, he's like, so since you are coming after me to blackmail me, would that mean you are pursuing me in a sense? And Tauka is like, hell yeah, I'm pursuing you. I'm going to like come after you and I'm going to expose this to the public. And then he's like, you're pursuing me. Well, then I guess you're fucked. And the guy had like pimples all over his face. And it turns out that, this is what I was talking about when back in the Wonder of You arc, how it's like the head doctor's ability not only can cause disasters, but it can like rewrite reality in a sense and like fabricate situations that would just, it's really mind-boggling the way that this stand works. So pretty much he's like, oh, so you're pursuing me, let me fabricate this reality of, hey, how about when you picked up the lokakaka, when you put it in the jar, you accidentally touched the juices of it, then you touched your face, and then that it went into your face, and then that means you consume the rokakaka, and now something of you has to be exchanged. And then the guy's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And it looks like his pimples are gone, and the equivalent exchange takes his medulla oblongata, which is like the power button of the human, like that attaches your spine to your brain and all that, turns to stone, crumbles, and the guy dies. And it's like, that is just, it's like, okay, maybe that happened with him touching his face or whatever, but like the fact that he said, yes, I'm pursuing you, the head doctor, it's almost like the head doctor's ability went back in time, rewrote reality of what this guy actually did, and then like it brought it into reality. It's so hard to explain what I'm thinking right now about this ability, but I guess that's the only way I can put it into words. Because if that guy said, I'm not pursuing you, he probably would have been fine. And even if he touched the rokakaka with his fingers and then his pimples or something, it probably wouldn't have performed that equivalent exchange. But just saying I am pursuing you caused all of those things to happen. It's just, that's crazy. And it's also important to mention that although the head doctor has been seen multiple times as an intangible object in different sizes and different weird areas, in this scene right here, he's very much tangible and he very much has a face. He's very much being able to interact with things. He was holding things. He was talking to this guy. So in some sense, the head doctor is a real person. And I know everyone's been theorizing that like he was just a stand and maybe that he was Toru's stand projected in some way, but I'm to believe that the head doctor very much is a person. Holly has met him. Many people have met him. I was reading back a few chapters and Holly talks about how like when she was first being affected and they first started experimenting on her, like a new group of doctors came in. There was Poor Tom, Wu Tomaki, Urban Gorilla, and the head doctor. Like this was like a year or two ago. Like they showed up, they're a real person. And a year ago, a year and a half ago, Toru was still dating Yasuo. Like, I believe Josuke and Yasuo and Joshua and all these people are first years in college. So just a year ago, they were all still in high school. So I don't believe that the head doctor is literally just a fabrication of Toru's stand. I think he's a real person, and I think he's a real rock human. But as we'll see, right after a quick update with Mamazuku and Josuke. So really quickly, I want to talk about this theory. So as much as I don't want to just breeze through Mamazuku being on screen, we have to. So Mamazuku is walking towards Josuke at the hospital. He notices the head doctor's behind him. He says, oh, the head doctor's coming after me. Let's just keep going towards Josuke. And then we see Josuke waiting. And then we have the translation error that I mentioned earlier in the chapter fixed, where it says, but I can make him come to me, he says, instead of I can be made to pursue him, which was just weird. So that's fixed. And it turns out that, isn't turn out, but my prediction is that the next chapter, we are going to see Mamazuku go to Josuke, then meet up, and then the head doctor confront them, because it's pretty clear that the head doctor is going towards Josuke right now. So it's nice to see all of them converging. So now, back to Toru and the final page of the chapter. We see Toru singing again, and then his eyes are still closed, and then the headphone pops out, his eyes open, and he seems to be like, he has that determined look on his face previously before he put in the headphones, and he says, like he smells the air, he smells it. He says, it's Higashikata Josuke. Interesting. So he's not pursuing, he's inviting. Boom! Bombshell reveal. Toru is in cahoots with the head doctor. He might quite possibly be the head doctor himself. So let's get theorizing, boys. A big theory in the community popularized by Eonstar, great JoJo YouTuber that I will link down below in the description. Does a lot of JoJolion theories. One of the prevailing theories was that Toru is the head doctor and that his stand is controlling what we believe to be the head doctor. Another theory is that Toru and the head doctor is one consciousness controlled by two people. Because if you remember earlier when the head doctor was off in the corner, Blair Witch style, it looks like he was just like a mannequin or almost like a puppet waiting to be activated. And then as soon as someone starts talking to him, he like had that look on his face where it looks like he just like a consciousness hopped into his body and he was like, boom, okay, we're in the head doctor's body now. And then he went through that whole conversation. And we've seen many times with Toru, if you guys remember, I believe it was in the last chapter when I was like, look at Toru's eyes. There is something suspicious as hell about Toru's eyes right there. No one in JoJo has been drawn like that. That isn't suspicious or evil. And that was another scene where it looks like a character could have been activated in some sense or a consciousness swapped in. And it looks like right here when Toru stops listening to music, the head doctor's consciousness that was just interacting with Tauka, the journalist, jumped over to Toru again. So it's one consciousness that's able to jump between minds. So people were saying that maybe Toru is the stand user and the stand that he has is the head doctor, and he is able to use it almost as like a puppet in a sense and jump between it. And I guess it also, so this stand you're telling me is a humanoid stand that we've seen what it looks like back in the Wonder of You arc. It can control two people's consciousness. It can project itself into a physical being the head doctor. And it can also make itself illusionary based and intangible, like we saw in Mitsuba and Jobin, how it was like going through pictures and mirrors and stuff. And also it can cause damage if you try to pursue it. That's bullshit to me. That's too many abilities to be controlled by one stand. My personal theory is that Toru is who he says he is to some extent. He was a high schooler, he was dating Yasuo, and I think the head doctor is a person. And I think he is the one that's still in control of all of this, because that just makes more sense from a villain perspective, because back in a few chapters ago when we were focused on Holly, she actually said that the head doctor was controlling all of the subordinates. You had like Poor Tom, Urban Gorilla, Wu Tomiki, all of them, and as well as he was controlling the drug trade. So that makes sense for the head doctor to be the big kingpin of the rock humans and be the villain for the part. When Toru, it doesn't make sense for him to be a villain based on his design, his age, and his history. So I really don't think that Toru is a rock human, because he went to school with Yasuo like a year ago, and we know that rock humans age differently from other people. Like Wu Tomiki, even though he said he was like 30 or 40 years old, he was actually like 70 or something. So rock humans age differently, and I assume if Toru went to high school with Yasuo, she would have known him for a long time, since like growing up. So he would have aged regularly with Yasuo, they dated, and what makes sense to me is that similar to the way that the head doctor was performing experiments on Holly Joestar, is that maybe he had an eye on this intern or this part-time student that was working at the hospital, being Toru, this young gentleman right here. And maybe he selected Toru and started doing Rokakaka experiments on him as well. And somehow, through feeding him Rokakaka or doing some sort of experiments on him, has sort of turned Toru into his puppet to do his bidding. And the head doctor can somehow see through Toru's eyes, control him in some way, and switch his consciousness. And it would also make sense if Toru was like living in Morioh at the time, or maybe even exposed to the Rokakaka, was able to develop a stand, and that was the stand that we did see in the Wonder of You arc, and his stand is the Wonder of You. And then, so it would still make sense that Toru's stand maybe allows the swapping of consciousnesses in some way, and then the head doctor's stand is the pursuing ability. There hasn't been a lot of like troubleshooting or foolproofing done to this theory, because there's still a lot of things to be revealed in JoJolion, and this will make sense one day. Hopefully it's not like another D4C arc that just still I can't explain to this day. Hopefully this will make sense eventually, but right now I see it that Toru, he's not, I don't think that the head doctor is like a red herring and Toru is the man in control. I definitely think that the head doctor is like the big bad guy here, and he's taking advantage of Toru in some way. Another way that this stand could work, I think it's really important to take note of that when Toru puts his headphones on and he closes his eyes and he starts dancing and he plays the Wonder of You, I think that might be a trigger for the stand to activate. So when he puts the headphones in, vroom, his body powers down and he does like the little dance because his eyes were closed as well. And then the consciousness swaps over to the head doctor. And then the head doctor is in the corner, boom, wakes up, talks to the guy, does all that. And then Toru takes his headphones out, stops listening to the music, and then the head doctor, boop, puts his consciousness back into Toru. I think that would make a lot of sense. So when the head doctor's not being activated, he's just sitting like a mannequin. And when Toru's not being activated, he is dancing to his favorite song or something like that. To me, that makes sense. And it makes a lot of sense why the head doctor would take advantage of Toru, because he has a history with the Higashikata family. Obviously, he's close to Yasuo, and Yasuo is close to the family, so that would give Toru an excuse to get close to the family and get close to this branch. And I know that probably sounded really confusing, me just trying to explain my thoughts on this, but I hope that makes sense, guys. The head doctor is the big guy in control, and he's using Toru in some way, and maybe he's done some sort of experiments on him because he knows that he's close to Yasuo, and Yasuo will be able to get him close to the fruit. Although then again, now that I think about this, the more it starts to fall apart, because it's like, well, why does he need Toru to get close to Yasuo? We see that the head doctor can just appear places. Like if the head doctor literally is already inside the house attacking Jobin, what the hell does he need? Why does he need Toru to get close to the family if he can just walk in there himself and just doesn't need to be suspicious about it, or doesn't need to be stealth about it in any way? So, but still, like, if Toru is this big bad guy, it really doesn't make sense to me. From his history, he's not a rock human. He went to school with Yasuo. We're assuming he aged normally. He had a relationship with Yasuo, and then maybe he started to go through changes once he started working at the hospital. I definitely think one thing that is like, for sure, is that when he puts in the headphone and plays The Wonder of You, he is shutting down his body, switching consciousness to the head doctor. And so they're able to swap pretty much. It's really confusing, guys. I know. It's JoJo. We're used to it. It's a confusing ass story. And the last thing I want to mention is that because I keep saying that there's two stands at play here because there's just so many damn abilities happening. It's interesting that Toru was listening to Crazy Train and then The Wonders of You. So we like 95% sure know that a stand is called The Wonder of You by Elvis Presley, that stand we saw in the hospital. And now he was also listening to Crazy Train. Interesting. So maybe like, what if the iPod that Toru has is like a Ben 10 Omnitrix and he can like change his ability by listening to different songs? Dude, how sick would that be? So he's like, Crazy Train. I'm now using Crazy Train. Switch song to The Wonder of You. The Wonder of You. Boom, I use the ability to swap my consciousness. Think about that, guys. Ben 10 Omnitrix in JoJo, but it's an iPod. That would be like the perfect conclusion to Araki's, like, you know how Araki throughout all these years has been naming things after musical references. That would be like perfect for an ability to literally be able to like select musical references and use stands. That would be like, that'd be really broken, super OP, but it would be a cool stand. So that's all the theorizing I have for this month. Can't wait to see what happens with Jobin. Is he really dead? Is it another fake out death? I think we're gonna have serious implications with Jobin. Huge theorizing to be done with Toru and the head doctor and where all that's gonna go and how this is gonna be revealed. Hopefully Yasuo is okay. Can't wait to see the fight between the head doctor, the confrontation with Josuke as well in the future. So like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys all real soon. Peace.